Can you see more?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Okay, I'm going to
It can be so small.
make sure.
You're muted.
Now raise your hand if you're hearing my voice.
Now.
Very good. So if you have been searching this afternoon for a platform that is trans-denominational and that seeks to explore the insights from the writings and the thought of Mordecai Kaplan about contemporary issues of Jewish life, you have landed exactly at the right place. Welcome. We're very glad that you are with us. Folks are muted, so if at a later point you come into the to the dialogue, you'll have to unmute yourself. And I want to remind people that this is being recorded because there are many folks who are very interested in the topic, in the dialogue, who couldn't make it at this hour. So we record, and with it, you're present to share at a later point. So did I say I'm Dr. Jeffrey Shine, the Executive Director of the Kaplan Center? I may have not mentioned that. I'll see you a little later when it comes time to gathering some of your comments and questions for the panelists. But for now, I've spoken quite enough, and it's my pleasure then to give you to Jane Susswine, who is the president of the Mordecai Kaplan Center for Jewish Peoplehood.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Jane Susswine, president of the Mordecai Kaplan Center, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this first webinar of what promises to be a very exciting year. All of our webinars are listed on our website, so I won't take the time to list them. Now to our panelists. For fuller versions of their bios, just go to the chat box. I will give brief bios. Dr. Eric Kaplan is a co-founder of the Kaplan Center. He teaches contemporary Judaism and Jewish education at McGill University and is working on the final volume of the Kaplan Diaries. He is currently assembling an anthology of Jewish social activist thought in North America. We look forward to that publication. Dr. Mel Scult, a retired professor of Judaic study, is our beloved source for everything Kaplan. He's published a biography of Kaplan, an analysis of his thought, and edited 3 volumes of the Kaplan Diaries. Rabbi Marc Margolius is vice president for faculty and program for the Institute of Jewish Spirituality, IJS. Among his many responsibilities, he hosts IJS's online program in Tikkun Midot practice, integrating Jewish mindfulness with attention to core midot, or character traits. Elizabeth Caplun deserves credit for this webinar, and for that we are grateful. She responded to a call to our Kaplan Center friends to discuss our vision statement several months ago and asked about Kaplan and Musar. So here we are. Elizabeth emigrated from Belgium to California, where now retired, she spends her time practicing and teaching Musar. Rabbi Les Bronstein, our moderator, has served as rabbi of Bet Am Shalom Synagogue in White Plains, New York since 1989. He's past co-chair of TRUA, a rabbinic call for human rights, and has served on the Reconstructionist Rabbinical Association board. I hope you'll join us for our next webinar on Sunday, November 12th. The title is What Remains Revelatory in the 21st Century in Mordecai Kaplan's Thought. And I give you Les Bronstein.
Hello, Jane, old friend, thank you. And thank you and Rabbi Jeffrey Schein for this gracious invitation to me to be able to be the moderator and therefore have a front row seat to learn from the mind and the heart of our terrific panelists. I'll tell you what we're doing today. First of all, let me just also look out and acknowledge that I see many of my teachers, former teachers, friends, colleagues, a lot of my congregants here. So I'm waving to all of you and thanking you for spending this time with us. Just to give you a sense of what was going to happen today in the next hour or so, we're going to hear from each of our panelists as I call on them, and then they're going to talk with one another and respond to one another. And then for the that'll be about an hour or so, and then it'll be about 30 minutes of their responding to your questions and your comments that will be you'll give us through the chat, and Rabbi Jeffrey will filter those to me, and then I out to you. And then finally, after the program is over, you can all go home, but you can also hang around for another 20 minutes or so on the screen and visit with one another and continue the conversation. And then, of course, as Jane said, you'll continue this conversation ad infinitum, because that's the goal of the Kaplan Center and its marvelous initiative. We were only 5 days out from Rosh Hashanah. So we hope this program will stimulate what the rabbis call cheshbon hanefesh. It's an accounting term, taking an accounting of ourselves, of our souls, as we enter this time of teshuvah, of turning around and turning forward and making a correction, a tikkun in ourselves. We're going to ask our panelists to enlighten us about their own particular work. We're hoping that to learn about the practice of Jewish Musar and about Kaplan's own important work in this area that many of you know Kaplan might not be aware of, his work in that area, and then his general area of ethics and how that will overlap, and then the overlap with mindfulness teaching, and other Jewish tools for moral and spiritual growth. I want to acknowledge at the outset that there are perhaps two different audiences on the screen. Those who may know Musar and who are looking to connect to Kaplan. And those who know Kaplan, got it, Kaplan, but what's this Musar stuff going on I've heard about? You want to make a connection there, and then both will want to know what the other one has to do with their main interest. So Elizabeth and Mark, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to ask each of you to spend 5 minutes or so giving us a glimpse into the ways in which you use Musar, Elizabeth, and mindfulness, Mark, in the work that you do. Elizabeth, if you'll begin with your 5 minutes or so. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the honor of speaking to you, and hello to the friends who are on the screen. And just to jump in right away, I got interested in Musar because it is blending two very important topics for me. One is to how one can deal with all the dilemma and the challenges and the complex situations that we encounter in our daily life. And the other part of that is how to do that with a Jewish lens. And Musar is a toolbox that is steeped in Kabbalah and a very rich history of development of Jewish ideas. At the same time, it is relevant today to help each of us not only grow spiritually, but also make this world a better place through our relationships. So that's the large envelope. Practically speaking, what does it mean? For me, it means that I'm the kind of person who do my cheshbon hanefesh, my self-awareness exercises in a situation. When I'm in a situation, I'm not very good at meditating, I have to tell you immediately. But when I'm in a situation, I want to understand why I reacted a certain way. Was there a better way to do what I did? What were my choice points? Why did I miss it? Or can I congratulate myself that this time I did not miss the mark, I did the right thing? And Musar, with its focus on character traits, and by the way, I don't know if you, on the big framework is that we all have, B'Tselem Elohim, all these traits that can make us a better human being. It's up to us to find the discipline and the work, however each of us feel doing it, to actually express that desire for a greater goodness. So this is my interest in Musar. How it came about is that I moved to Bishop, California, in the high desert, very unlikely place to have a Jewish life, but somehow, and we can talk about that more later, I found about 10 people with whom I can study Musar, because Musar is about practice. It's not just learning about it, it's actually the rubber meets the ground here and what we do about it. So I found a group of people with whom I can study Musar, coming from, they're Jewish, some with a Jewish education, some without, some atheists, agnostics, the whole gamut of what you can find today in a progressive Jewish group. And we studied together. And through studying Musar together, we've been about 4 years now that we're doing it. We have built actually a community. And that community now gets together on Shabbat, and we have a whole cycle of Jewish holidays that we celebrate together. So that's one of my main points, is that not only did it help me grow, it does help me grow as a human being, it also gave me and became the seed of a Jewish community, as I say, in a very little town where the closest synagogues is half a day drive away. So this is what it means to me. I don't know how much time I have, less 1 minute. Think about it with the following analogy. I'm a gardener, And I know that if I amend the soil, I can provide nutrients for the plants to grow and hopefully keep the weeds at bay. Do I succeed every year? No. Do I keep at it? Yes. Does it get better? Yes. And that's the work we have to do with ourselves. Feed that these elements, these soul traits that can make us a better human being. And once in a while, we have to eradicate the weeds.
So beautiful. Beautiful. Rabbi Marc Margolius.
All right. 5 minutes, huh? Oh boy.
5 minutes. Well, you're gonna come right back. So
Okay. All right. Well, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here and to be among friends, colleagues, former congregants, etc. So the question is about the role of mindfulness in this. I will say that building on what Elizabeth said, that let us posit that as human beings made B'Tselem Elohim in the divine image, that we are factory equipped, as it were, with divine traits. I think it's a very Kaplanian concept, as our dear friend Mel Scult, Dr. Mel Scult, said when I was at his congregation at West End Synagogue, that the Hebrew term that is most appropriate for the English term salvation, in the terms of understanding God as the power that makes for salvation, and that every human being is engaged in a quest for salvation, is that there's an impulse implanted within us to seek shleimut, to seek wholeness, to seek shalom, to seek connection, to seek integration. There's an integrative force within us. And there are a number of different qualities, midot, shall we say, measures of qualities, which are different aspects of that drive that are innate within us. So maybe in the second round, I'll talk a little bit about maybe some distinctions here. But in terms of mindfulness, which of course is a kind of contemporary term, for myself personally, and I would say, I think I can generalize for us at IJS, in the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, understanding mindfulness as a Jewish spiritual practice really can be understood as a practice of presence, not gifts, presence of cultivating a state of being hineni, being fully present in the moment, not distracted, not occupied with the past, not occupied with the future, but fully flush and present in the here and now, which of course we see multiple times in Torah itself as the moment when revelation takes place, when there's a connection between the divine and human beings, and when a wisdom arises. That it all happens in that moment. So mindfulness, from a Jewish perspective, we can understand it as a very authentic Jewish practice of imitating, our forebears in trying to practice that kind of presence. And I would add to that, practicing Shabbat, that is, infusing everyday life with a kind of Shabbat consciousness, which likewise is about being fully in the moment, not in the past, not in last week, not in next week, but in this moment, this day. And the premise, the theory of change holds that if we are able to do that, those midot, those qualities that are in us that we're factory equipped with, they can manifest through us. So the practice is pretty simple as a spiritual practice. And I would say, like, really, as a Reconstructionist, Kaplanian Jewish spiritual practice, to practice Hineni, Shabbat, mindfulness as a way of being still enough to allow those qualities which are within us and are yearning to be expressed. They want to be expressed. And in keeping with yesterday's Parsha, with Nisavim, we don't have to go elsewhere to get them, right? They're in our mouths, in our hearts to do them. Moses provides the proof text for that. You don't have to go anywhere. No one's going to give it to you. It's in you. All you have to do is allow it to emerge from you. So that's the connection between, quote, mindfulness, which, I would just substitute Shabbat, Hineni practice. If we as Jews could take that practice seriously, these qualities would emerge from us. How am I doing on time? 1 minute? 1 minute. Or wrap it up. Wrap it up. 1 minute. Okay, that's a full minute. That's plenty of time. That's a lot of time. All right. So just excuse me if I'm trying to cram it all in here, but in terms of where I came from this, growing up, and I grew up in the Reform movement. I thought when I was a kid, a teenager, I thought, well, holidays come every year, and we should improve every year. And I thought by the time I got to this is year 68, I should be pretty darn good, pretty close to perfect, really. But as we know, it doesn't work that way. We repeat the same things. We're stuck in the same groove, right? So part of this also, what you're going to stick in here, the mindfulness part, is not just being present, but about being about loving kindness, about chesed being embedded in us as well, and that is the route, that being able to practice that capacity for forgiveness. This is the connection to Yamim Noraim coming up. That to be able to really be able to approach this not through harsh judgment, by unlocking these midot through self-compassion and compassion for each other, is part of the mindfulness-based approach to this as well. All right, Dibarti.
No, beautiful. And I'm thinking of Rashi, who says because if that truth that we seek is up in the heavens or across the sea, then we would be commanded to have to figure out how to go and get it, in which case we would have been capacitated to do so. And what you're saying is we are capacitated. We are. We are. But part of the problem is that we don't necessarily believe that. We think we need to get it, we need to get it from somebody else, But it's here already, right?
Yeah.
We're going to call on both of you again now, first Elizabeth and then Mark, and ask you to just spend another 5 minutes each, just to go to your gut experience and your knowledge to tell us how is this work Kaplanian? Remember, it's the Kaplan Center, and we're selling a big idea here, an idea around a great teacher and prophetic person. How is the work that you do Kaplanian? And you said that already, but now maybe zero in on that, and each of you take 5 minutes, and I'll give you a signal when it's 1 minute left. Here we go, Elizabeth.
Okay, well, thank you, Mark, for mentioning compassion, because that is self-compassion. Compassion for others is definitely at the core of the practice. The place where I feel the most Kaplanian in this is in going from the Musar study to the community aspect. And the challenge there is, well, it's God. Just to be put it succinctly, right? We are a group with varied opinions and creeds and positions about religion. And the question is that has come up is whether Musar needs to be God-centric, whether Musar is depending on the belief in the divine. And my practice has been to use a number of approaches to be open and find a way of coalescing the efforts of the group around that question. So you can use metaphors to designate the divine, the source of life, etc. Or at the other spectrum of that, you can use the word divine to actually signify the potential for good that dwell in each of us, right? So you have these, and for me, the practice of Musar is a balancing act or an integration act, really, so that everyone can come in and feel comfortable sharing, because the sharing is really the holy part of this. There is a tradition of working in vad or working in pairs and holding each other accountable. So that's one aspect where I feel that Kaplan's thoughts are important for Musar. The other part is how to reconcile all the free will that we have and the desire for fulfillment with carrying the burden of others, which is also central to Musar. And here I want to quote Levinas, who said in a remarkable essay that he calls Religion for Adults, and the title says it all. It's a very rich essay, and he says there, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, Judaism's challenge is to integrate humanity's desire of quasi-unlimited freedom with the desire for transcendence. And then he also says, as to be in an ethical relation with another human being becomes the ultimate self-realization as a person. So that to me is the essence of Musar, and at the same time why I feel that a Kaplanian approach to it that is a bit liberated from the vocabulary of Central Europe yeshivot, where it really became a movement, would be very beneficial, not just for us who are already engaged in it, but also to bring in Jews and maybe non-Jews, but anyway, a wider variety of people to understand Jewish wisdom and maybe lead to a practice that is that fits where we fit in the religious axis, if you want. So that's kind of, I don't know if it's clear what I'm saying, but this is really at the core of my spiritual inquiry about Musar and Kaplan, is how these two can merge to really provide a framework that can be used for all of us, by all of us.
Wow. And Mark, thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Thanks, Elizabeth. All right, so I'm going to inject a quick aside, which is probably would take us on a tangent, but I will say, just because I think it's some significance here, that that the brand, the flavor of midot practice that that I teach, that IJS offers, we don't call it Musar. We call it Tikkun Midot practice. And just like very quickly, I think the distinction is that I think where our focus is to draw on this practice from within the Jewish mystical tradition, although of course, Midot practice goes all the way back to the rabbinic period. So, which is to say that the emphasis is on this idea of these qualities, really emphasizing that idea that these qualities are innate, that they're literally in our bodies, that they're like that we can access that through bodily awareness. So what I want to say about to the question is that I want to shout from the rooftops that this is an essential Reconstructionist, Kaplanian way of understanding Judaism. And in my opinion, Reconstructionists should be preaching this, all over the place. Deeply, deeply Kaplanian, in the sense that, as I said, first of all, that there's this Kaplan posits this yearning within the individual for connection, for goodness, for truth, et cetera, and collectively we also have that. You can put it this way: the Jewish people want to do the right thing, right? We want to do the right thing, and we want to support each other in figuring out what is the right thing, what is the sacred way of acting in the world, and every Jewish community has an opportunity to do that as well. To see that a collective yearning and individual yearning as a manifestation of, I'll say the word God here, God acting through us in a palpable way, not in an abstract intellectual way, in a palpable, experiential, visceral way, is it can be a truly powerful spiritual practice. My experience for people who've done it, transformative to an extent, which is to say, and here I'll throw in not a Reconstructionist rabbi, modern Orthodox Rabbi Yitzhak Greenberg, who when I was an intern at Klal, said to us as rabbinical students, said that the goal of Judaism is to help us be 15% better people. And at the time, I thought that was ridiculous. I thought it was 100% better people. And now I joke, I've lowered the bar to 2%. And that awareness of how challenging it is to actually change behavior requires community support. We can't do it on our own. We're just banging our heads against the wall. But if collectively we create a community in which people can be supportive, forgiving of missing the mark, and understanding about the obstacles that get in the way, like what block, it sounds great, we're programmed to do the right thing, but we don't. Why not? We're also programmed to have to struggle to do that. What's that about? And so to be able to be vulnerable and to be fully human, that's really the thing. What the genius, all right, 1 minute, less, wrapping up. I think one of the genius aspects of Kaplan is the fusion of divinity and humanism. And humanism recognizes our fallibility as a given. We are fallible, we are mortal, we are finite, etc. And we have the capacity to transcend that. And if we overreach, we're going to fail. But if we are realistic and support each other in that realistic search for the divine and to manifest that, then we might have a shot at it.
Wow.
All right, keep RT again.
Both of you, don't go away, because we're going to need you to respond to what comes next, right? And to have a conversation with what comes next, patiently waiting in the wings. Dr. Mel Scult and Dr. Eric Kaplan, I'm going to call on you now, and I'm going to say, Eric and Mel, both of you are internationally recognized experts on the writings and the thinking and teaching of Dr. Rabbi Marc Margolius. So we want to know how, in your estimation, might Kaplanian understandings enrich the work of Musar that we've been hearing about, or of mindfulness that we've been hearing about. We had two experts, one on Musar and one on mindfulness, talking about how they see Kaplan as making a space for their work. Now we're coming from the other direction, outward towards them, and again towards us as the audience. So Mel, if you'll go first, and here we allotted about 8 minutes for you to talk, and again you're going to get more time to talk, but you talk between 5 and 8 minutes, and then we'll turn it to Eric, and then we'll come back to you, and then all of us. So Mel, Bakasha, please. You have to unmute. No, unmute. There you go.
In order to really understand Kaplan, what I have to do is I have to look into my closet. I have a lot of junk in my closet, but I also have a large archive. And recently I came across a group of sermons from Mordechai Kaplan that he gave in 1921, the titles of which, What is Justice? Individual Responsibility, What is Sin? Moral Independence. Amazing that all these sermons dealt with ethical issues. Now, the point is that when we think of Mordechai Kaplan, we think of Judaism as a civilization. We think of community. But what is important? The community is important only as the carrier in the context of the ethical. Kaplan thought about it all the time. His last book, as you know, was The Religion of Ethical Nationhood. Now, the point is he comes by it very, very strongly because his father was a follower of Israel Salanter. And when I met Kaplan in 1972, he referred to his father as a Musarnik. The importance of ethical life was important to Kaplan, and to the extent that he thought of joining ethical culture, which was ethics minus Judaism. He thought of joining, but he decided not to. And when he founded the SAJ, he thought of calling it the Society for Jewish Ethical Culture. Now, when he preached at the SAJ, he said that the Torah should be lifelong moral education. And that meant to Kaplan talking about the contemporary political, economic, and social issues of the day. He said in the diary that his congregants missed the otherness of religion. In other words, they expected it to be irrelevant to the kinds of issues that he was concerned about. And I have no doubt that, for example, if he were alive today, he would talk about immigration, he would talk about voting rights, he would talk about Black Lives Matter. And those were ethical issues. And because they were ethical issues, they were moral issues, and therefore could be material for sermons. One of the sermons that I found in the closet dealt with the matter of individual responsibility, and Kaplan interpreted that as meaning selfishness. And he said husbands and wives are selfish with respect to each other. Employers are selfish with respect to their employees, and that the employing was a matter of rapacity. That's Kaplan's word. So his concern is lifelong. When Kaplan started out, Nietzsche was very, very much the rage, and everybody was reading Nietzsche, and as was Kaplan. Nietzsche seemed to say that God, we're finished with God, and everything was allowed. And Kaplan had, as Mark has said, and Elizabeth, had a strong belief in God and rejected Nietzsche. For Kaplan, God was still very much in evidence, but not as a person. In a sermon that I found recently in 1904, very, very early, Kaplan said that call the beyond a person is meaningless. Kaplan thus proclaims his commitment not to God as a person, but to the infinite, to the beyond, as he calls it. The question is whether or not this higher consciousness of the immensity of the universe can be a source of the ethical life. And Kaplan, of course, says yes. In other words, he believed that we can lift ourselves to a consciousness of the beyond. And if we can do that, we can be better people. His major concern within this problem was, where does the commandingness come from? We see in the early diary that he worried that the ethical would be just a matter of preference, a private preference, and could be easily dismissed. In other words, what he said was, at that early point, that the ethical was not subjective, it was objective. And he said in 1904, in the early diary that I recently discovered, that, quote, the moral order of the universe is as much an actual reality as the natural order. The moral order is as much a natural a reality as the natural order. In other words, when we talk about the planets, or when we talk about natural phenomenon and we talk about moral phenomenon, they are on the same level in terms of being objective and in terms of being existing apart from us. That's the point. They exist apart from us. Kaplan wrote in the 1940s an essay for Louis Finkelstein, in which he said that the ethical values are independent of expediency and self-interest, independent of expediency and self-interest. So what we need to do is we need to understand what that means to be independent. And how am I doing? 2 minutes. Yeah, I'll try. I have the...
You're coming back. Don't worry. You'll keep going. You're good.
We have to turn to Santayana in order to understand what Kaplan means, because Santayana asserts his firm belief in the absolute and eternal values as the most real things of the universe. The most real things of the universe. In other words, the ideals that we hold are real, and they are as real as any aspect of the natural order. They are absolutes. They are absolutes. And Kaplan has a statement about the absolute that's really quite exciting. Caitlin, you want to put it up? To state the matter concretely, the right of every person to the full development of his physical and mental capacities, the solidarity of the entire human race. These are unmistakable goals which must be accepted as absolutes. Absolute. In other words, the absolute is real and the absolute has power. When our rabbi goes to the Islamic Center on Friday to show unity with the Muslims, she is moved by the power of the ideal, the absolute. I sort of have a vision of the absolute pushing her down Broadway in order to get to the center. What I want to say is that this is the meaning of the power that makes for salvation. I want to say that this means the power of the ideal, which pushes us to shlemut, to our completion, to our fulfillment, to our movement to perfection. And a number of speakers have mentioned the matter of yearning. And Kaplan, they are quoting Kaplan, because Kaplan said in 1940, in the yearning for salvation, for life, for its wildness, for truth, goodness, and beauty for their own sake, for freedom, justice, and peace in society, man experiences something supra-human or supranatural. One who experiences that yearning in himself cannot be so vain or unreasonable as to believe he is alone in the possession of this yearning. This is the realm of the beyond that he talked about in 1904. He could not believe in God as a person, but he expresses his devotion to the beyond, to the ideals, to the absolute, to see ourselves, in other words, in a larger context, to move out of the tiny tub of ourselves. And that is the meaning of the ethical and the meaning of Jewish civilization. Thank you.
Incredible. Incredible. And a shout out to Caitlin Hayes. I just want to make my own for being our Zoom gabbai for the day, and keeping all of this together is so important that you're here and helping us and keeping it together. Eric, looking forward to hearing from you now, and then we'll hear from everybody again, responding back and forth to one another. This has been so rich. Eric Kaplan, Dr. Kaplan.
Hi, good to see everyone, and not an easy place to go after everyone who's spoken, especially my teacher and colleague, Mel Scult. But being, I guess, gutsy as I am, let me put some stuff here, which I'll share with you. So, I put together, many more sources than we could, ever look at in the time that we have, but they'll be uploaded, I think, together with the recording. So those of you who are interested can take a look at it. The focus really of what I want to talk about in the 5-6 minutes that I have is really the idea of practice, in Kaplan. And I'm going to kind of just quickly walk you through a couple of things to talk about that issue of practice and spend more time on one particular thing, which I've put here. So I'm kind of going to be tour guide for the first 2 minutes or so, and then we'll spend a little bit more concentrated time on the last thing that I want us to look at. So first of all, just to establish and to build upon what has been said, I think the incredible thing about Kaplan is that when it comes to ethics and the significance of ethics, the significance of social justice, he comes up with these quotes that kind of throw out everything that you might expect. Most rabbis, especially rabbis of Orthodox trained rabbis and rabbis of his generation, to say, right? So the problem of seriously minded religionists is not how can we get people to become religious, but how can we get religion to make people better? What should be done so that religion can exert an impelling influence on people's behavior, an influence that would show itself in their being more honest, more just, more considerate, right? The very type of practical questions that are so central to Musar and to mindfulness. And then he says, unless the belief in God can contribute to their becoming what they should be, it will ultimately become obsolete, right? So this is very strong. And then he has a little shot. If you think that, that the purpose of religion is to bring comfort, that's not going to work, as he says in the next passage, right? So how can it do that, right? How can belief in God as he understood it, and how can being a part of this Jewish religious group serve to make people more honest, more just, and more considerate? So, as I said, the first things I'm just putting up here, you'll take a look at them afterwards, and then we'll get to something which we'll spend a little more time with. So one thing is that he believed in daily prayer. He believed in daily worship and in the Guide to Jewish Practice, which he and the fellow editors of the Reconstructionist published in 4 consecutive issues of the Reconstructionist in 1941. One of the sections is about prayer. And he has a whole section here on daily prayer, which I've excerpted for you here. And he's really kind of addressing very contemporary ideas, right? The rapid tempo of our living, while it has tended to break down the daily habit of religious devotions prescribed by tradition, has not invalidated and cannot invalidate the ideal on which those traditional practices rested. We still need to sanctify life by pausing to dwell on its meanings, lest we become, instead of living souls, mere cogs in a mechanism of production and consumption, right? We may not be able to devote as large a portion of the day to religious usages as did our fathers, but that makes it all the more imperative that we use to advantage such time as we can devote to them, and that our daily devotions be made so significant that they can save us from being transformed by our mechanical civilization, and this is 1941, into soulless automata without any idea of our personal or collective destination or destiny. We dare not travel so fast that we cannot read the signs on the road. I think that's mindfulness. Now, in order to do this, he suggested that a daily book of devotions be created in which the traditional prayers would be very, very condensed, and that the bulk of the space would be given to a variety of readings that could help people center themselves. At the beginning of the day, he argues that morning prayer is really the most realistic and could be the most powerful, and that these traditional blessings should also include a lot of new brachot, new blessings to focus in on things that the tradition doesn't contemporarily deal with, like on seeing a work of art, on hearing a concert, on receiving a communication by telegram. and on riding in an airplane, 1941. This was major things, right? Because ultimately, this kind of connects to the theological question, because ultimately, Kaplan believes that the more thankfulness that we cultivate, the more we are able to imagine a world that is better than the one we live in, right? The more we see that our world has a lot of goodness in it, the more possible it is for us to imagine that even greater goodness can be realized. So therefore, thankfulness and things that can cultivate thankfulness are an essential part. Now, as I showed here, he talks about the message of Sukkot. He talks about how he thought Yom Kippur could work in this way. I gave you a quote from his Passover Haggadah to show how he thought the message of the Haggadah could do it. It could work that way. He had thoughts about how education could be molded to cultivate the positive characteristics that we want. And here we get to the thing which I wanted to show, because it is unique, I think unique to Kaplan, and adds a dimension here that hasn't come up so far. So this is from an editorial in the Reconstructionist magazine in 1951. This is a time where Kaplan was chair of the editorial board of the Reconstructionists, so we know that his hand was very evident in this particular section. It's not on Rosh Hashanah, unfortunately, it's on Shavuot. And he says, Christianity, especially in its Pauline form, sought to dispense with the need for law. It regarded law as an inferior method of fulfilling God's will. The individual should obey out of pure piety. Judaism, on the other hand, not only rejected this antinomianism, like anti-legalism, but insisted that unless the society makes ideals an integral part of its system of regulations, individuals will never develop the strength of will necessary to resist temptations. In other words, it's not sufficient just to read good things, right? A community to have impact, has to do more than that for its members. Now, how would that look like? So he says, there are areas over which Jews express themselves as Jews. The synagogue, the center, the school, the philanthropic organization, the lodge, and brotherhood. These organizations cannot have the ethical influence to which they aspire unless they translate their ideals into codes of behavior binding upon their members. The synagogue, for example, ought to expect every one of its members to live up to certain standards established democratically by the members themselves. These standards ought to be enforced, and members violating them should be subject to the sanctions of the group. Today, there is hardly anything a Jew could think of doing which would lead to his expulsion or exclusion from a congregation. But even golf clubs have ethical standards enforced by exclusion or expulsion. In each Jewish institution, there ought to be a kind of Fulbright committee dealing steadily with issues of moral responsibility within the institution and governing relations with other Jewish bodies. Now listen to this. This is the last thing I'll leave you with. Social justice committees and social action commissions concerned with the general welfare have their place, of course, but committees which establish norms of decent behavior within the narrower confines of Jewish life are more likely to exert a direct and beneficent influence. So all of this to say that he has a strong sense of practice. Some of it might be what we could assume. Prayer, the way holidays can be approached as practice, including daily practice. But on top of that, he felt that the Jewish community had to speak in a strong ethical voice and had to have its presence felt in the amongst members, so that the community itself would be a vehicle for the improvement of practices, that they would be, like Elizabeth, your group that meets on a regular basis to examine midot. But here he's imagining it functioning somewhat differently.
Remarkable. Somebody in the chat, one of my congregants actually asked, where do I get that article? Can we get it? And we're going to send all of this and package it along with the recording so that you can get that, Lois, and I see that. This is very rich. I have to throw in here the great joke of the quip about the Jewish telegram, because you mentioned the telegram, Eric, that we should be doing modern readings in the telegram. It's the telegram says, this is the Jewish telegram. It says, start worrying, stop. Details to follow, stop. And that's the end of the telegram, right? But a Kaplanian telegram, of course, is saying that. It's saying, look out, be aware, start worrying. People are not behaving as well as they should, and they're not working toward a practice of ethical behavior. And how do we get to that? And of course, we're looking at, in addition to that telegram call, we're looking at tools that all of you are giving us, the kinds of practice, both that mindfulness, that Musar, and that Kaplan himself had delineated. So let me ask the four of you now to spend the next 10 minutes, and it's a little bit of a free-for-all here among the four of you. I want to call on you. I want you to just respond to one another and say that just watch yourselves so that you make sure that all of you get to talk, right? So let me open it up. Maybe the two of you who spoke first would go first, Elizabeth and Mark, and then Mel and Eric. But respond to one another and what you've heard so far.
Les, I just want to add that we're doing very well on time, so that the response could be as much as 15 minutes, and we'll still have time for.
All right, great. And then you're going to start formulating your questions, dear audience.
I'm reading through them.
Sending those to Jeff.
Please put your comments in the chat room. I'm trying to go through and.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I do have some questions that have been directly sent to me as well, and I just want to make sure that we get around to the questions after we have the discussion period between our guests.
Okay, excellent. After Rosh Hashanah. No, I'm kidding. Okay. All right, here we go. Please.
Elizabeth, you want to go first?
All right, I'll jump in. So first of all, as usual, I'm learning so much from Eric and Mel. Actually, everything I know about Kaplan, I learned from you too. So thank you again for that great presentation, and challenging in some ways. So to relate it to what I heard and maybe to my own how can I say that thought process about religion and ethics. I think both of you mentioned how Kaplan, although not imagining the divine in a body as a person, still had this transcendental view of the divine, representing that potential for good, but still being outside of us, although we have received all these midot that are now part of our own body. I think that's what I'm hearing. And that brought up a couple of questions for me. First, I'm going to read a quote. And the quote is the following. I'll tell you who wrote it afterwards. If you ask anyone what is morality based on, there are two factors that always come out. One is reciprocity, and associate with it a sense of justice and a sense of fairness. And the other one is empathy and compassion. I think we can all recognize that as pillars of our Musar practice. And of course, human morality is more than that. But if you don't have a sense of justice, if you don't have compassion, if you don't have, then the whole edifice kind of crumbles. Now, what's interesting is that quote is actually from an animal behaviorist, Frans de Waal, who observed these qualities in experiments that he has made over the past 20 some years or more at Zaydik and other places. And that, of course, brings to me the question, what would Kaplan do with such knowledge? Would that change his view of the divine? How do you integrate the progress that we have made in science and understanding of how the universe functions with our more traditional or reconstructionist view of what drives our desire for greater goodness? So that's one question I have. I don't have an answer. The other question actually comes from another quote of Emmanuel Levinas, and where he's saying that same essay, Religion for Adults, which, by the way, he delivered in 1957 to an audience of Christians, Muslims, and Jews in Morocco. So he was out of his normal turf. Levinas, by he's bringing in the Lithuanian and Ukrainian tradition to the French culture. So it's a very interesting mix of concepts and visions that we have. But he says that atheism is better than piety towards a mythical God. Atheism is a risk that one must take but overcome to understand monotheism. Monotheism is impossible for anyone who has not encountered doubt, solitude, and revolt. So that is kind of the premise of where he comes to really introduce the ethical relationship as the place where the divine manifests itself. I'm just curious about how you feel this kind of thoughts integrate with the Kaplanian reasoning, and how Kaplan himself would have evolved his thought process if he had lived long enough to integrate this discoveries and research that we have now about animal behavior and the universe.
Mel says he'd be talking about Black Lives Matter, be talking about environment, and he'd also be talking about the latest frontiers of animal behavior. Anyone on the panel? Anyone jump in?
Yeah, I will say amen to everything Elizabeth said, but I want to shift it a little bit to the tachlis, to the practical, because I was struck by the immediate enthusiasm about that final article that Eric cited. Oh, where's a copy of that? And I felt excited because I feel like it represents the instinct to center this very issue as the raison d'etre of religious community. That the purpose, and I think it's quite striking in terms of how synagogues present themselves, Jewish communities generally present themselves, in terms of compelling rationales why people should be part of those communities. And I do not generally find among those, this is a place that will help you be your best self. This is a place where we work together to help each other do our best. You can join us because we have a code where we try to hold each other accountable. There are not many Jewish religious communities or any religious communities that I see actually that make this the front and center. Say that religion is for the purpose of helping us be our best selves. And God is that aspect of ourselves that wants us to be our best aspects of ourselves, just to make it very simple. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity here as Reconstructionists and as Kaplanians to say this goes to the core of what this is about. This is not about some abstract intellectual ideas about God. This is about what one would think, and I think people generally think religion is supposed to be about, but rarely is, as Kaplan, pointed out sharply and clearly. So I want to switch from that to actual strategies for doing this. It's great to talk about. It's great to have webinars, et cetera, but how about getting it done, right? So I'll point out that there are a number of communities here, including, people from, I think, Rabbi Fred Dobb is here, and Jane is here from B'nai Keshet and West End Synagogue. Number of communities that were part of a project called the Tikkun Midot Project, which was specifically about this, about systemically integrating this practice into communities in a number of different ways, weaving it into the fabric of the community and centering this, making it part of the synagogue mission statement, building it into the educational program for adults, for families, and for children, weaving it into services, pointing out throughout davening, throughout services, all the different ways in which the Siddur is a supportive tool in keeping the focus on this, right? But it requires a concentrated effort to lift that up and to center it and to say, this is our primary reason for being here, is to help us access that aspect of ourselves. So I think that's, that has been done, but it could be done on a much broader scale. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, can I add one thing to follow up with what Mark says, is that the challenge is also to catch or bring in Jews that are not currently part of any Jewish organization.
Mhm.
And there are many. There is actually a lot of people that could express their Jewishness, but don't find a place in congregations to do so. And I think Musar is actually an excellent gateway.
Sure. Sure. Mel and Eric? Mel?
Yeah, there's no doubt, and I'm not just saying that because Mark is here, that the integration of Musar at West End was extraordinarily valuable. But I have come across sort of traditional aspects of Kaplan's mind, which Eric articulated in terms of setting standards, public standards which people must conform to, and talking about expulsion. It's the height of irony that he suffered excommunication. But would any congregation survive if they said to people, you have to act in this particular way, and if you don't act in this way, you don't, you can walk. So I don't know what to do with that, but I don't think I can accept it. I don't think Kaplan did it at the SAJ. I'm not acquainted with any set of rules that he set forth, which would be a requirement for membership and for being part of the community.
But Mel, we see it in the diaries that you edited and gave to us, and that Eric, you're now working on the continuation of. He was very frustrated much of the time at the behavior of the congregants toward one another, at their not niceness, at their not unethical behavior so much as that it's something bordering on that. And but he couldn't do anything about it, but he sure could tell his diary about it.
I'll tell you the truth. I see Kaplan as the cosmic cheerleader. He's a cheerleader, and he believed very, very strongly in the power of the word. And he taught rabbis to give sermons for 50 years. And he believed in the power of the word to transform people. And I don't know whether or not that's a valid faith or not. Maybe Mark wants to comment.
Eric,
the power of the word. Yeah.
Eric, some of this is coming. It's sort of like backlash toward that marvelous piece that you shared with us. So now you have to either defend it or defend yourself. I don't know which one of the other.
Well, the way I understand it, right, because of the things that he talks about, like this idea is evident in multiple writings of his, right? If it had just appeared in this one editorial, I wouldn't have brought it, but it's all over the place. And throughout his career, especially from the 1940s onwards, I think that what he's talking about is, I mean, for somebody to get, expelled from the community, they would have to do something extraordinary. I think what he was talking about like the equivalent of like spilling, I don't know how much garbage into the environment and then trying to evade responsibility. Right. That's, a person like that, he would say, shouldn't then be called up on Yom Kippur to have one of the aliyot. But when it comes to when he talks about creating standards for professions and standards, for professional groups and standards, for a synagogue and for, I think he's thinking, about the power of the defining of what we stand for and the power of encouraging people to bring the things that they do in their real lives to the table of conversation, right? Because he was very deeply concerned that religion just becomes a way of speaking. It becomes tangential to our everyday life, right? He says in the introduction to the meaning of God in modern Jewish religion, the reason why he's writing the book is because he doesn't like the fact that people have their religious life on one side and their day-to-day life on the other side. And he wants to figure out a way for people to have the religion shed light on the everyday life and backwards there. So I don't think we should get kind of caught up too much in the words exclusion and stuff like that. I think that would be a very, very rare case. So, that's all I'll say about that. But, Elizabeth, if there's time and it doesn't interfere with the rest of the program, I'm curious to know a little bit more practically how your group works. If you could give like an example of what a weekly meeting of your group might look like.
I want you to make sure we have time for some of the questions. When it's Mark, you were waving your hand a minute. My sister is and her husband are loyal members of West End Synagogue, and they see you very much as their rabbi. And my sister was a loyal member of that Tikkun Midot project. She loved it and found it a great personal growth there. So and some of our questions that I've seen in the chat have to do with that transfer from the theory to the practice. And she talked very much about how you in fact did that. So maybe Mark and Elizabeth sharing that. That's where a lot of these questions are going. It's like, how do we translate it? And also they want to know, how does this get down to the younger generation? One of my congregants asked that question too. How do we get it beyond us old guys? So
maybe I can suggest in regard to Eric's request that we make that the first item of business. We finish about a half hour from now during our more open time, because I would like to hear more about that as well. But let's honor the questions that have come to us first. And I think the way we're going to do that is to give Caplan 10 minutes to go over some of the questions that came her way, and then I'll share some of the questions I've been monitoring. So Caplan, why don't you go?
Yeah, so as Liz said, we do have some questions about the study versus the practice of Musar. But another question that I'd like to read that was given, sent my way by Larry Pinsker, is that he says that he finds that the elephant over the table is that Kaplan's list of shoulds about religion is supposedly supposed to help us attain. Which human beings are supposed to subscribe to this list? And do we have a shared common sense of purpose, or do we disagree about the kind of person who should emerge from our mindfulness? Let us be mindful of how metaphor papers over genuine struggles of human behavioral decision. And, to many people, we find that it is a fuzzy, unattainable outcome when we are dealing with the biological, social, and material realities that humans have. Do we consider these ethical and behavioral standards to be something that we have a means of expanding the base when we go into this particularism? Or do we find it to be too particular of a language to make it universal among Jews?
Caitlin, that actually builds on some of the same ground that some other questions came in. So perhaps we can put those together and let our panel weigh in on those that they have a particularly strong response to. Is there any other question you want to put out there and before I add a few?
Yeah, there was
Okay.
another question by Lois Gartenberg, who asked, to what extent are these powerful words? And I think she was referring to Kaplan talking about the ethical obligation of religion in building people's character and in building people's morals. To what extent is that actually reaching and impacting the younger generation?
Say that ending again.
Yes, she's wondering to what extent is Kaplan's drive to have religion build up people's moral character impacting the younger generation?
Okay.
I can maybe talk to that a little bit. Practically, in my group, we span probably 3 or 4 decades in age. So there was a point where we have people in the 30s and all the way to yours truly being the elder in that group. And it's really wonderful to have the input and the participation of younger people. The key to that participation, I would say, is the ability to hear, to listen very, very deeply to what everyone has to say, and not try actually to impose standards. So when I hear the word standards in relative to Kaplan's thought, I'm saying, how does that work in Musar, right? I mean, Musar is about choice points and situations. So I can give you an example. You have a loved one who makes a request from you that you feel is conflicting with some other value of yours, and how do you deal with that? And I'm open to being as specific as we want. I have all kinds of examples to give. That's where Musar comes in place, is how you get to the ethical decision that is for you. So I'm once you have this idea that here are the ethical standards that you have to live up to, and you don't emphasize that the balance and the choice points that are so central to Musar, then I think that this is when you start restricting the impact of Musar and maybe not being able to hear younger generations that may have different backgrounds, history, and preoccupations in today's world.
I would like to speak to that issue. The point is that Kaplan was a great belief in pluralism. It comes in everything that he writes. And what he's advocating is something very, very difficult. I am, at the present time, reading a book by about Simone Weil, who was a young woman in the middle of the 20th century, a very, very unusual thinker. And she talks about separating the matter of experience from the way we perceive. In other words, you may be in the same situation with another person, but the way they perceive that situation may be very different from the way you perceive it, even though you have the same experience, and that given the case applies very, very much to the matter of generations, because the experience of individuals who are 20 or 30 or whatever, as opposed to me, would be very, very different. And I think it has to do with the matter of attentiveness. In other words, you can't really assume that a person who is transgendered For example, will experience whatever in the same sense that you experience that, and that you experience something, that is available to both of you. So I think it is that kind of attentiveness, which a number of people have mentioned today, that is at the root of the generational problem. We have to listen to each other and never really assume that because we have common experiences, that the experience are taken internally in the same way. They're simply not.
Boy, that's a powerful point, Mel. I'm going to build on it just a bit and integrate some of the other comments and then leave it open for our panel to choose, to have a choice point about which one of these is touching you and calling out for a response. We'll send out the resources that have been suggested here, including Rabbi Fred Dobbs' article. Rabbi Fred Dobb mentions that Nancy Fuchs Kramer, one of our panelists in November, has written about Kaplan, Musar, and some of these related issues, and we'll certainly send that out. Someone in the chat box noted that Eric and Mel's speaking b'shem Kaplan, that you need to be about everyday situations. Well, I don't know about you, but in my mailbox every morning from the New York Times comes the ethicist and the dilemma, the everyday dilemma. And for a number of years, there was about our behavior. For a number of years, there was Dr. Asher Ben Meyer, who was the Jewish ethicist, and he tried to put these things in perspective. I think we very much need that dialogue and attention to issues of everyday life. There were a couple challenges that came out that I want to share. Someone noted that while we all know how difficult it is to make Shabbos by yourself, right? You need a family, a community, or a partner to do that. Maybe that isn't true about the ethical life. I mean, maybe with proper reflection and attention and introspection, someone can steer their own ethical course, be captain of their own ship in a different way than they can about their ritual and communal life. So that was a question. Another question, which, full disclosure, comes from me. I wonder how Kaplan reconciles his belief in an absolute, and here I want to say that Rabbi Richard Hirsch and Eric Kaplan are working on a volume built on Kaplan's Musar work that has not yet been translated, where they talk about the notion of cosmic polarity, that some of the certainty in the universe in regard to the natural world also is paralleled in the human world, and those two processes, while distinct, are also related. So you'll want to read that with interest. We're hoping this summer that Musar ve'emunah, a selection of it, is available, and what a wonderful study group it will make once it is available. So my point back to this is that I am not sure that Kaplan's belief in an absolute ethical moral standard draws sufficiently or takes into account the way in which he's a pragmatist drawing from the tradition of John Dewey. From John Dewey, every ethical stance we make can be deeply believed, passionately believed, but it is only an end in view. It eventually dissolves and is put under further analysis. And there's a part of Kaplan that I read as needing to take that into account. In regard to the many comments about forming community and communities that regulate themselves, stay tuned.
Mhm.
January 7th is a dialogue with Rabbi Ed Feinstein, myself, and Rabbi Amy Bernstein. And a lot of it will focus on the legacy that went from Sinai to Kaplan to Schulweis, to Harold Schulweis, a devoted disciple of Kaplan's. And Schulweis had the insight that was profound and reshaped a major synagogue, that the problem with Jewish life, it was too abstract. You couldn't relate to the community as whole. You had to find, this is sympathetic audience for this, you had to join a chavurah, you had to be part of a small group, because only in that context of the smallness and intimacy that you will generate, now here's the thing, you will generate belonging. I think the history of the chavurah movement gets big pluses in terms of connection and community. I think we'll hear from Ed Feinstein that it didn't have similar success in generating norms that govern the chavurah, yet alone the larger synagogue, yet alone the Jewish community. So seems to me there's a tension between that Jewish imperative to join and be part of and Kaplan's insistence that once we're part of it, we have to be ethical legislators of the kind of life that that we lead. And I'm sure we will be taking a look at that in the future. And I think I'll stop there in terms of questions that I saw coming out. Les saw some others that I did not.
Not only not to interrupt you, just on the point that you were just making there, that question that somebody said is, does one have to be in some kind of community in order to be considered a good Jew? I think some of the things that Elizabeth is working on, gives us an alternative, but it's a community. I don't think you have to be in that either, but that's one question, and that's something that you were just now addressing. So should we ask our panelists to each to say a few words and wrap up here, and then I'll close, or what do you think, Jeffrey?
Well, I think we should give them a chance to respond to the perspectives that came from you, from Caitlin, and from me in terms of anything that they would like to say.
We're here. We're all here for you today. Let's hear from all of you panelists. Mel.
I don't know whether it's possible, but I would like to hear from Larry Pinsker, who was the first rabbi at West End Synagogue. I think he asked a question. Les, is that possible? Larry?
Yeah. Of course, we were reading Caitlin was reading his literal words to you, so we did hear from him in that way. You want him to speak? Yeah, I mean, I'm afraid, well, I love Larry's my old friend. I want to make sure that everybody, if we start calling on the panel, and everybody else. But Larry, are you out there? Can I keep you to 3 minutes?
Les, I think that the issues, as Jeffrey said, are absolutely on the table. And my dear teacher and friend Mel, thank you for asking that. The one thing that I would talk about, if I were going to go on for your 3 minutes, and I'm not going to, when I was an undergraduate, George Lincoln Rockwell of the American Nazi Party spoke at Antioch College, where I was an undergraduate. The response of the entire auditorium, which was packed standing room, at the end of his speech was to en masse walk out. One person was left behind, well, actually 3. I was one of the 3. And I followed up by meeting some of the people who supported him. They loved their children, they supported their spouses, they were compassionate towards certain people and relentlessly objected to the behaviors of others. It was an extraordinary insight into how original equipment from the manufacturer, meaning impulses toward ethics and social bonding and so on, can sometimes produce outcomes which are not egalitarian and useful. They're not equitable. They're not future generating. And so singing Tomorrow Belongs to Me from Cabaret does not produce a mass of people who take an ethical list and say, this above all else is an agenda for humanizing the human race. The original equipment got all kinds of parameters that are wonky. End of talk.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thanks.
So Mel, good for you. Shkaya. Elizabeth,
Les, can I just give one resource that
of
I'll put
course.
in what we delivered to you regarding Mel of listening to other generations? This book, Generations by Jean Twenge, is an extraordinary study, not only of what's happening we're used to studies of millennials, but she's done deep study about Gen Z, the next generation, and even some speculation about polars, who are people who live with the polarity of the climate crisis and the political polarization, who were born after 2013. It is the most complete synthesis of what we know about differences between the generations. And of course, Mel would say, I would say, that's not the same as existentially being in a relationship and listening to people, but it does provide a picture of how the moral, I guess it's related to the question, are the younger generations concerned about taking ethical action? And the answer, according to Twenge, is of course they are, but sometimes in their own idiosyncratic style that we would not, I as a boomer would not understand.
Yeah, but we wouldn't understand.
That's it.
One more.
So this last comment actually goes in the same direction. There's a poll that was made to follow on the Pew survey, and that found that the younger and progressive side of the Jewish population is really looking forward and looking for a way of having a meaningful spiritual experience and practice. And they're very, very concerned with social justice. So that's one of the main point. So I think the question is, yes, there is definitely a need, and there is a population out there that may not be affiliated with any of the traditional synagogues that exist and that are looking for ways to make a meaningful impact. So the other question, I mean, I saw a question in passing about being welcome or not welcome as a believer. Did you guys see that?
We did, and you did, and you're the right person to speak to that because of your
right. So as I said,
yes.
I've been navigating that, and I hope I can say successfully, in the sense that I haven't lost anyone yet because of that. But back to the challenge, it is to find texts and especially source texts that allow for a wide variety of option to express your relationship, to one's relationship with the divine, or even skepticism about it, right? Because there is no one wants to feel excluded because of that. I mean, I have more of an experience of being excluded from orthodox conversations, Haredi conversations, but I would not want someone with a deep faith in God to feel excluded from my conversations. So that's where I'm coming from.
I think one of the virtues of Reconstructionism and of our congregation is its inclusivity. One of the most vocal members of our Torah study group continuously says about herself that she's an atheist. And so, and she keeps on talking about the God character, which I must confess bothers me.
The Bible is literature.
Yeah, but she's there and accepted, and
Mark, you know this. You're a rabbi of the congregation.
Yeah,
Are believers
I
and
was
some
going to
are.
say that I think this topic, this area is actually a very fertile ground for, it's fertile for common ground across theologies. And my experience at West End Synagogue Board that bears that out for exactly the reason you were saying, Mel, that people of all different theologies or lack of theologies all could agree that the function of religion is to help people be a mensch and find common ground there. So I want to my last contribution here is really just to go back to one thing I said earlier, because I think it's very important for me. If I understand Reconstructionism as religious humanism, one of the things that I think is beneficial about this is that, first of all, that this is not about aspirations or codes of behavior. This is about understanding human psychology as a manifestation of how God operates within us in a sophisticated way. So religious humanism is something that honors our humanity. And our humanity encompasses our fallibility and and the fact that we are imperfect, but that the divinity aspect of ourselves is about striving to transcend that to the best of our abilities, and having communities that hold both of these, that are committed to humanism, that are committed to human fallibility and vulnerability, which is an element we haven't really talked about. In order for a community to really be committed to this path, it needs to be a place that feels safe for people to be vulnerable and to admit their shadow side, to be able to admit their failures, and to feel safe and supported in that context. Not a bad lead-in for Yamim Noraim. That's how we start Yom Kippur, by everybody acknowledging our failures and giving permission, as it were, for us to be together. So I think that's an important element of this. I don't want to throw in. I don't want to be the only one who's not throwing in some Kaplan quotes here. So I will add my Kaplan quotes, which is, and I'll put it in the chat too. God is that aspect of reality which elicits from us the best that is in us, and enables us to bear the worst that can befall us. That's a good one. You like that, Mel?
Yeah.
And there can hardly be any more important function for religion than to keep alive this yearning for self-renewal and to press it into the service of human progress.
I mean, I think the important thing is that it's not accomplishing, but it is the yearning, which is the key, which Mark, you mentioned a number of times.
I got that from you.
I'm gonna pull us together at the end here with my own Kaplan quote, if that's okay, and then we're gonna go to that promised hang around time. Is that fine, Jeffrey? And
fine, unless Eric has some direct response.
I didn't mean to leave you out here because you were also
everyone
talking
else's
too. Yeah, let's hear it from you, Eric. Yeah, that would be very important. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I guess, two things. One, I don't think Kaplan's approach to ethics and values, as we've seen it, conflicts with his Deweyanism. And I also don't, and I think it's also very clear that he does not imagine values to be, ironclad values that never evolve or never change, nor is he unaware of the fact that in life you have conflicting values. I think all of this is accounted for, and I just want to call your attention, I won't read it, but I just want to call your attention, right, just to make this point, right, when you'll see the quotes that I've put together. So he looks at the Seder as is teaching us that a child has to be trained effectively to be free, to cherish freedom and know how to use it. He then goes about to explain how does one do that And in so doing, he emphasizes very clearly the individual path that each person takes, cultivating each individual to find the path that is the one that is appropriate for them, to connect to the power that they have within them. So all of this would take place within a dialogue, a broad dialogue on large values such as honesty, for example, which Kaplan was very concerned about, but he would never argue that there is one response for each person in each situation, and the free person is the one who is able to look at the options, engage with the community, engage with the tradition, and come up with the smartest decision possible at that moment.
Eric, I would only add to that, and this is based on the seminar we had in Jerusalem at the Vakshe Derech around Kaplan and democracy, that you find in Kaplan's work a critique of how progressive education focused on the individual, which was important, but what they really should be focusing on is what's the unique contribution the individual can make to the group and the Jewish people. And he thought that was a failing of progressive education, that it isolated the individual, and it didn't do its real Jewish work of taking all those talents of our Jewish poets, our Jewish activists, and finding the right channel for them in Jewish life. So, yeah.
I want to say a word about honesty in responding to Eric. Kaplan said once in a very disturbing statement that if we use honesty as a measure, sermons don't last very long. In other words, it's easy to preach and not to sort of act in the terms that we're preaching. And I am afraid that we are guilty of that as well.
Well, I heard it quoted this morning in our Reconstructionist morning minyan in the morning, and which is part of our practice in our congregation. This is all online, and the person quoted Pirkei Avot says, "Lo midrasha yikar ela maaseh," that you can schmooze all day, but putting it into practice. And I was talking about social justice, talking about ethics is important, but not anywhere near as much as honestly putting it into practice and doing it. Yeah, I've seen some nods there. I like that. Now I could, what? Go ahead, Jeffrey. Tell me.
No, I want to say that I think one finds in Kaplan, particularly the meaning of God in modern Jewish religion, not only the encouragement to take ethical stances, but real critique of Jewish life that falls short of the ethical. He's very much about that in terms of the avodah services, sweeping out the moral corruption in our Jewish life. And I shared this a little earlier, was part of Tikkun Hayam, the group that's trying to improve the waters in response to climate, and does a reverse tashlich. So it's, in other words, we go around and gather up the schmutz that's been put into the environment to make the waters healthier. So sometimes it involves a radical critique of practices that we do. I mean, I'm no expert on this, but I've encountered in my congregation the value of not throwing bread when you do tashlich. That's horrible for the ducks and the other birds. Use bird feed. Amend your practice so it comports to the ethical treatment of Sar Balei Chayim. So there's a radical sense in which Kaplan's going to encourage us not only to actualize the ethics within us, but to be critical of the ethics we've embodied and enacted and made normative in our Jewish life.
We're going to do the Shem Omro. We're going to learn that in the name of the one who taught it. We're going to do it with our teenagers who very much want to put those values into practice, and that's what they beg us to do. So we're going to do that on our tashlich, our reverse tashlich next week. Thank you.
Good.
I think I can close here, and then we're going to stay on the line. Yeah, I'm okay. We're good. I'll make sure everybody on our panel wants to say anything else jumps in and make sure you do, because and then I want to give it a nice closure here. Okay. Yep. This is the closure I want to give is that there in the makeshift art that we have on this in this tent that we put out on our back lawn for High Holy Days at our synagogue is this 3 words of this verse from Isaiah from the Haftarah from a couple of weeks ago, Harchivi Makom Holech, which is increase the capacity of your tent, which we take to be a good kind of motto, that we need to make a big space for so-called believers and for so-called non-believers, for so-called practitioners and for so-called not yet practitioners, and to try to make a true space for everyone to come in and find relationship and a kind of practice in the High Holy Days. So I'm going to give you a couple of words, my quotations from Kaplan, and this is from my favorite of Kaplan's writings, and that Mel found it and made sure it got into the Reconstructionist Siddur back 35 years ago. This is from Kaplan's Rosh Hashanah volume for the Rosh Hashanah Master. And they called it God, the Life of Nature. And I'm just going to quote a couple of places in it to give you that sense of his mystery, of social justice, the call to consciousness, and the call to practice, and the call to make a space for so-called believers and so-called non-believers. And then it says, our ancestors acclaimed the God whose handiwork they read in the mysterious heavens above, and in the varied scene of earth below, in the orderly march of days and nights, of seasons and years, and in the checkered fate of humankind. And I'm skipping ahead. God is the oneness that spans the fathomless deeps of space and the measureless eons of time, binding them together in deed, as we do in thought. God is the mystery of life, enkindling inert matter with inner drive and purpose. And again, I'm editing. God is in the faith by which we overcome the fear of loneliness, helplessness, of failure, and of death. God is in the hope which, like a shaft of light, cleaves the dark abysms of sin, of suffering, and of despair. And finally, he concludes, it is God's Spirit that broods upon the chaos we have wrought, disturbing its static wrongs and stirring into life the formless beginnings of the new and better world. I love it. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining such a great, broad audience, and to Jane and to Rabbi Jeffrey for your continued work on the Kaplan Center, and to our 4 extraordinary panelists for your beautiful Torah today. Mark and Eric and Mel and Elizabeth, thank you so much for your friendship and everything you've done.
Thank you so
Shana
much.
Tova Tikatevu should be written in that, write ourselves in that book of life and justice.
But we want to add to those thank yous to Les. Sometimes when we invite someone to be a moderator, it's symbolic. You know, it's pretty easy. You could do half in your sleep. But this one required several different meetings and putting out different templates to get the richness of the experience that Elizabeth, Mel, Eric, and Mark brought to the table. So we couldn't have done better than to have Les Bronstein working hard at that and facilitating it as well as he did. And this indeed is our time where we just hang back a little bit and we invite people who have had thoughts that haven't yet been shared. If you'd like to unmute and come forward, you could share a response to the to our time together, a question, maybe something that you want to keep thinking about that was raised in the course of the webinar. So it's an open mic, as it were. I'm going to shut mine off, and please
Jeffrey, this is Bob from Prescott, Arizona. Is this an appropriate time to discuss my question regarding virtual communities versus face-to-face communities? Rabbi Pinsker is also interested.
Yes, it is. This is time for anything you want to talk about that was triggered by the day. So I invite you to a offline conversation sometime, Bob, because it's a arena that I've written about and I care a lot about. But I think I'd rather hear you take the platform now, and we'll see if there's another conversation. So what's on your mind?
Well, I participated in a lot of virtual communities. Politics was a problem in our Reform congregation here in Prescott. I prefer that politics is not part of a synagogue, but it was forced on me, and as a result, I left that congregation. And because of that, I participated in a lot of services online. So I'm curious about what your opinion is.
Let me do some simsum and see some contraction and see if there are opinions out there among the 35 or so folks still with us. Is that availability of online digital learning and prayer, is that a bracha? Is that a blessing for us? Or are there downsides that we don't anticipate, but maybe during this time of doing a heshbon hanefesh, as the high holy days are on, we should be thinking about that. What do folks think?
So I think it's a blessing because there are some people who just can't get there in person. However, there's also something so special when you are there in person together that just can't be, you just can't do it online. So yes, and both end.
Thanks, Sandy Goldman. Nice to see you. Robert, you have a response.
It's an interesting challenge. I'm part of a Talmud circle that exists here in the Bay Area, where it meets monthly at 5 different locations with different rabbis. But the members of each of the Talmud circles are made up of roughly 15 people from very different congregations, very different communities. And I think we have found it very meaningful to find a circle of people to study together, share common texts, argue with, and build the relationship over time that we had not been able to find within the walls of our own defined synagogues.
I'm hearing you say that it expands the borders of your community. It allows you to join multiple communities that never would have been possible.
Yeah. Jeffrey, can I just interject? I think just because a lot of what we do at JS is hopefully to reinforce and strengthen congregations in what they're doing, and to offer programs that can be used within congregations, but also for people who are unaffiliated or for any reason, for physical proximity to Jewish community isn't possible. That we have found that the virtual communities that can be built can be quite powerful. And if I might just do a little plug, that this year we're creating essentially a community of practice for people who are interested in this through the weekly parsha, to identify a midah with each weekly parsha, and to create an opportunity for people to support each other as a community in that practice through chabruta, etc. So I'm just going to put some information if I allowed an infomercial, I'll throw a link in the chat for people who might be interested in that.
By all means. And can I point out the obvious, that without some digital technology, we would not all be flying to some central point in the Midwest to gather together to do this in person. I mean, the Mordechai Kaplan Center for Jewish Peoplehood benefits enormously from these dialogues, but I still hear Bob's question as being important. Is there some place you need to go to for a deeper appropriation of the ideas and integration into yourself? And I happen to think there is. So I'm appreciative that you raised the question, Bob.
Thank you.
other comments about those or other items?
I have to play the age card, and
Go ahead, Mel.
so I'm going to leave. Maybe anybody over 88 and also play the age card.
Okay.
And
Next
thank you,
year,
Mel. Thank you,
Well,
Mel.
in
I'll
this
be
case, I
leaving.
can say to Mel, I'll see you tomorrow for our study.
Yes,
So go ahead, play the age card. Get a good night's sleep.
thank you.
Okay, thanks for all your insights, as always. Any other questions or responses to the webinar? Now, Jane and I will sometimes put up a link after the webinar. It's important, we think, to do this, where you're invited to give us candid feedback. That was great. It might have been better if we grow from those suggestions. So if you want to take a few minutes and just say, I'm glad I was here this afternoon. I'm glad I was here, but I wish, or it's a waste of my time. Why was I here? Hope no one will say that, but be candid.
Let me just thank everybody again. The amount of preparation and thought and love that went into this is just extraordinary, as it is with all of our webinars, but it just shines through. And Elizabeth, again, thank you for putting the germ in our planning. And I can't think of a better topic to begin the high holiday season. It was absolutely perfect. Thank you so much.
I can't think of a better use of virtual communication and a virtual community than something like this.
I would like to say that seeing the faces that were here today is the history of my Reconstructionist synagogue experience. And from Larry to Mark to Jeffrey, whom I met when I first read the newest Siddur that met so many of my needs and aspirations as a Jewish woman looking for validation and acceptance of my goals and my dreams and my wishes for myself and the world at large. And today was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. Thank you very much for all who participated. And Les, if you would please send an email, I would give you, I'm Pearl Stark's sister-in-law, and if you would give me a copy of what you spoke about putting, I think at your tent, I would very much appreciate it. I'll put Pearl on to you to follow up.
I will do it.
Thank you.
I will do
Thank
it.
you.
I will do
Right,
it.
right.
Thank you so much.
Usually when our numbers go from 64, that was what we were at the beginning, down to 20, that's a signal that people have other things they need to move on to. And we've spent, I think, a very meaningful couple hours. So again, our thanks to the panelists. To
Thank
Les,
you. Thank you
and
all. And
Shana
Dr. Koch,
Tova.
Shana Tova.
Shana
Good New Year
Tova.
to everyone.
Tova.
Shana Tova, everyone.
All promoted.
Shana Tova.
Only good. Only good.
Okay, Eric and I are hanging on.
Okay, we're leaving.
Thank you. Thank
Caitlin, thanks too also. Eric, Elizabeth, Mark, Mel, thanks.
So Les
Thanks,
and
Les.
Mark, if you're holding on, one observation.
Oh, yeah.
One reason that this worked so well is we're already very familiar with each other, having had face-to-face time. There's a whole bunch of studies that make a big difference if you're just doing virtual among strangers versus people who have had a few hours being in the presence of the other people who are on the conference call. It makes a huge difference. And I think this was a terrific experience, worked very well.
Good. Thank you, Robert. And thanks for that insight. I think I agree with that piece of research. So, but thank you.
And thank you both for being here. Definitely happy to see you
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Well, thank you to Elizabeth for letting me know this was happening, and it helped break
Okay.
through the email
Okay.
stream.
Elizabeth, if you and Les want to stay on for just 1 minute, Eric and I have some other business. David, you would like to say a
Yes, if you
final
don't mind,
word.
I don't disagree about knowing each other in advance to make what the gentleman just said, to make the virtual work. But I haven't been with you personally before, but knowing your work from before, and certainly the work of Dr. Kaplan, has made this, has had an equal effect to knowing you from before. Just knowing your work has made this a very productive time for me. I'm a Reform rabbi with a traditional background originally. Remember Dr. Kaplan, when I used to visit him when I was in yeshiva in New York, I would visit his congregation SHA and heard Rabbi Miller. I go back a long way with it, and I just want to say that I'm a religious naturalist. I call my congregation Progressive Reform because we are religious naturalists.
Wow. Well, so glad you're with us, David. We had an email contact, and really appreciative. The first words that we are trans-denominational is worth underscoring frequently. Anyone who thinks that Kaplan may have a message, an insight, a perspective belongs on our calls. You probably I'm guessing Rabbi Hillel Cohn, who I worked with when I first came out of rabbinic school. And he was always the one who was arranging for Mordecai Kaplan to come to HUC so people could experience some of the MS, the truth about religious
If he had come permanently, would have been much better for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
I think that
anyway,
the Reform movement would have been
thank you for being with
reconstructed.
us and identifying yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Okay. All right. So I'm going to ask my colleague, Shana Tova Umituka. Eric's still there. Elizabeth and Les and Eric. Always good to gain some insider perspective. We guys and gals who were part of the panel. What was your experience, and what did you what's your take on what this afternoon was like?
For me, it was a wonderful experience, and certainly I'd like to hear feedback from you on how how I could have better structured what I had to say. Definitely would love to hear that. And also a ton of other topics came to mind. So for me, the conversation could have could be hours on end. And certainly there's plenty of material for subsequent webinars. I would love to really explore what would a Kaplanian take on Musar for a curriculum would be. I mean, I'm very serious about that. Currently, we have basically 3 schools: the Musar Institute with Alan Marinis, the Center for Contemporary Musar with Ira Stone, Rabbi Stone, and American Musar with Greg Marcus. And they're all wonderful. There is something that I feel would really be added to the offerings if it were more directly inspired by Kaplan thinking, and I can give examples, but that may be for another time or offline.
Well, be persistent, Elizabeth. See if you can get at least Mark and I on a call together. Eric and Les would be invited to join and think that through. We don't have a huge pot of resources to it, but maybe it only requires more creative thinking in an educational venue. So hold us accountable, make our ethical leanings take on shape and form. So I invite you to.
I'm looking forward to the Emunah in English. And when is that coming out?
Well, Eric might have a different view, but I just spoke to Richard Hirsch, and the two of us are hopeful by the end of the summer that the volume will be available. It won't be the whole volume, but really interesting selected portions. Eric, you can tell me afterwards that I shouldn't have said that because that's totally unreasonable, but I hope not. It's an important volume. So.
I'd say, Elizabeth, you were fantastic. You didn't specifically bring up the question of creating a curriculum during the panel, during the seminar itself, though you specifically articulated that as one of your hopes or goals when we were all meeting beforehand. So I left it and let you say it in your own way. And I think now that you didn't bring that up, and that's not a criticism, it's because it's your goal, not, but I would love to see you spearhead that. That would be wonderful.
I'm learning something with the Kaplan Center. When you bring an idea to the Kaplan Center, they put you to work immediately.
Yeah.
This is a dream, right?
That's like Reconstruction of synagogues. I have to tell you, they're exactly.
I'm a member of one.
Yes, I always used to say when you you join the synagogue, you get nothing. You say, "What do you mean you get nothing?" What there's nothing transactional. All you get is the opportunity to do stuff.
This is the ultimate potluck. You want to eat, you bring it.
Well, so I would want to add that I always go into these webinars where we have panels of 3 or 4 with some trepidation that it's going to be superficial because there's so much to talk about. And usually I'm wrong. I'm glad I'm wrong. And I certainly was wrong today. I mean, of course there's more analysis that one could do, but I thought people were genuinely stimulated by the richness of the perspective. So as the director of the center, I was very pleased about today. It was a great turnout and very rich. And this is one of those where a very careful follow-up. I already sent a note to our administrator, Sheridan, in terms of resources that were named get resent to people. And, maybe there's another gathering that comes out of that. So Eric and Les, any quick thoughts before Eric and I go on to other business?
I would only say, Elizabeth, that my hunch is, a Kaplanian approach to Midot or to Musar is very much along the lines of what you raised, right from the start in your presentation, which is applying his theology to the Musar framework. Because I think the rest of it would probably be fairly similar to, other than, he had a strong belief in expanding Torah to mean all documents of meaning, right? So he would, you could throw in Levinas, you could throw in children's books, you could throw in anything that could theoretically enrich the conversation. So that and the theology would really be the only 2 things that I think would set it apart.
I think there's definitely the theology, and that to me is an important question, not just for the group itself, but just personally. And the examples that I could discuss maybe in the future. For example, if you talk about kavod, about respect, honor, I had this experience of attending a class organized by the Musar Institute, and the class was taught by Rav David Nussbaum in Jerusalem. And Rav Nussbaum is an incredibly wonderful teacher. However, when he I hate to say however, but you'll hear me there. He opened the class by talking about, of course, it was obvious, about Nefesh and Selem Elohim. This is what you expect, right? And he said the following. He said, first class, he said that Jews have received not only a soul like anyone else, but have a superior soul.
Oh, no way.
And wait, exactly. So you want to go, no big deal.
You want to shut them down, but we don't do that.
It is a big deal. The reason why is that this is the kind of references that seep through the more traditional manual of Musar. And actually, if you go for that particular quote, it is in the Tanya, right? He basically pulled it out of the Tanya.
Not in Salanter.
And not in Salanter. I mean,
That's
I don't
the point,
know if it is not
the
in
Tanya is
Salanter.
not Musar, though, but the Tanya is not Musar.
But the Tanya is not.
Tanya is Chabad.
is Chabad.
Okay.
And the Hasidim movement and the Musar movement both pull from Kabbalah,
Yeah, sure.
right?
Right.
And to say that they are, and you know, if you look at, I don't know, Misha Berger, Rabbi Berger, Widening the Tent, beautiful, beautiful book, right? They want to kind of get into the Hasidic way of thinking. So the teachings are there, the references and some of the texts become problematic and become like a, if there is no explanation to it, if there is no reframing to it, becomes problematic and a little bit of a turnoff. Beautiful book, Ira Stone. I love learning from Ira Stone.
Yeah, sure.
Right,
It's
in
a
search
wonderful
of the holy life. And, you know, I mean, this is the kind of thing that I think is remarkable. I mean, first of all, they do a beautiful job at this, in this book to basically introduce Kabbalah to people who had no notion of it. I mean, it's probably the best explanation I've had. And then they take the midot that in the Hamak, it's in his Dover, what is the name of it? It is in Tomer Devorah, and he takes the few midot, he listed the midot, and then they kind of interpret that, which I think this is kind of a model that I'm thinking about. Is something you have a way of reframing the basic text into, you know, with the Kaplanian theology. Now, the Rabbi Stone is I know he taught at the Reconstructing Rabbinical, right? But I think you know, my feeling and my understanding of his theology is that it is different than Kaplan's theology. Anyway, so that's my general thinking about how we can move on from the basic books like the Spiritual Practice of Good Actions from Greg Marcus, which is a wonderful introduction. You know, it really got people hooked to it, to Musar. But after, you know, 3 years of looking at Marcus and at Morinus, we need something different.
Yeah, and I think there's, you know, some people say of Stone and Morinus that they soften Musar. If you look at something like, you know, Mesilat Yesharim and the classical Musar text, or Chaim Grada's portrait of the yeshiva, they are really portraits of a very harsh edge of ethical analysis. And I actually think that what I value about Kaplan is he would keep us from going too far in the other direction. I think it was important to soften Musar, but I think good old Litvak that he is, there's something about Kaplan's insistence on ethical introspection that is really critical. I say that in part as an educator who read with some interest the way in which in North American education, people became very interested in character education. And Kaplan, as well as his disciples, were staunchly opposed to it because it was a kind of recitation of the Boy Scout code. You know, here, if we say the values and we name them, we name the midot, that's what will lead to ethical action. And I think Kaplan is much more challenging than that. And I'm glad, because as we've heard so many times, it doesn't translate so easily. It requires real hard soul work to get at the ethical core. And I think Kaplan has some good clues. So I would be interested in hearing this discussion go further. Les Bronstein, my friend, were you satisfied?
Yeah, I'm much more than satisfied. And one thing I always learned from all of our panelists is how to take the arbitrary time frame very seriously and focus exactly what they want to say right into that time frame, and use complete sentences and paragraphs, and then stop, and then not leave me the moderator with the with the nasty task of going. I didn't have to. It was just so pleasant to be able to do this. So I mean, on a technical level, I loved it, and I love the process that you, Jeffrey, you walked us all through to to get us to put this together.
It was one of my goals to get people like well, certainly Elizabeth, who I had not heard of until she responded to our invitation, and people like you, Les, who's a good friend and a colleague. As you like to say, you make me feel very old, of at least 35 years, and find the place for you to make your contributions at the Kaplan Center. And I think you did that wonderfully. So, Toda Rabah, Shana Tova Umituka. I'm going to hang on with Eric to do just a little bit of Kaplan work. And you guys were wonderful. I thought it was very, very rich.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you. My pleasure meeting you all, and Shana Tova.
All the best.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Hi there.
I'm wondering, since this person is staying here, maybe we should close this meeting and you'll send me another link.
Yeah, let me do that. I think you're right. They're a member of our synagogue, and I think they were here and then they forgot to get off. I'll send you a link, Eric, right away.
All right. See you shortly.
Okay.